He built an empire out of fear and never once said, "I love you," until the night the fire came for his family, and his very last words became the truest thing he ever said. The flower shop smelled like rain even when it hadn't rained. Mira kept it that way on purpose. Eucalyptus in every corner, a humidifier running low and constant, something soft to walk into after a hard day. She had a lot of hard days. 3 years since her sister Talia died in a robbery gone wrong 2 blocks from here, and Mira still flinched at the shop bell some mornings, still checked the lock twice before opening. She'd built this place out of grief, the way some people build a house out of anger, brick by careful brick, so nothing could ever get in unannounced again. Across town, Kong Su sat in the back office of a restaurant that never quite closed, watching security footage on 4 small screens instead of eating the meal in front of him. 38 years old, still lean and sharp as the knife he never carried anymore because he didn't need to. Men feared him for what he used to do with his hands. They stayed afraid because of what he was still capable of. He didn't smile, hadn't in a long time. Somewhere behind his ribs was a 7-year-old boy who'd watched his mother's house burn from across the street, held back by a stranger's arms, screaming a name nobody answered. He never let that boy out. Love, in his experience, was the fastest way to hand someone a match. "Boss," Tae-jin, his second, leaned into the doorway. "Corner debt collectors hassling shopkeepers on 5th again. One of them's refusing to pay protection. Small flower place." Kong Su didn't look up. "Handle it quietly." "Already tried." "Woman stubborn." Something in the word stubborn caught, small and strange, in Kong Su's chest, the way a single loose thread catches on a nail. "I'll go myself," he said, standing, pulling on his coat. He didn't know why. He would wonder about that for a long time after. The bell above the door rang sharp. Mira looked up from the register, and her stomach dropped. The debt collector, a wiry man with a scar through one eyebrow, had his hand flat on the counter, voice low and ugly. "Last time I'll ask nice." Then the air in the shop changed. Kong Su didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply stepped between the man and the counter, close enough that the collector's confidence drained out of his face in real time. "She's under my protection now," Kong Su said. 4 words. The collector's eyes flicked to the tattoo at Kong Su's collar, and whatever he saw there made him back toward the door without another word. Silence settled over the shop like dust. Mira's hands were shaking on the counter. Kong Su noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything, and without thinking, he reached out and steadied her fingers with his own. Just for a second. Just long enough for her breath to catch. Neither of them said anything about it. If you've ever had a stranger step between you and danger, and felt the whole world go quiet for a second afterward, you already know exactly what Mira felt right then. "Thank you," she finally managed. "Don't thank me," Kong Su said, already turning for the door. Something in his voice was rougher than he intended. "Lock up early tonight." He left before she could ask why a man like him would bother, but he sat in his car outside her shop for 11 minutes before driving away, long after there was any reason left to stay. Mira told herself it meant nothing. She scrubbed the counter that didn't need scrubbing, replayed his hand on hers, and hated how much space it took up in her head. She'd buried one person already to a world like his. She wasn't about to hand it a second. "I don't do this," she told her reflection. "Not again." Across town, Tae-jin found Kong Su still staring at nothing in his office. "You went yourself," Tae-jin said. "Not a question. It was handled." "You've never handled a shakedown personally in 10 years. Tae-jin's eyes were flat, unreadable. "The florist. What is she to you?" "Nothing." "Good," Tae-jin said too quickly. "Keep it that way. Outsiders get people killed, boss. You taught me that." Kong Su said nothing, because Tae-jin wasn't wrong. He'd said those exact words himself, years ago, over a different woman's grave. But that night, for the first time in years, he dreamed of fire. Not the one that took his mother, a different one that hadn't happened yet. He woke up with Mira's name half formed on his lips and told himself it was nothing. 3 days later, he sent a florist order to her shop under a false name, then canceled it before it could be delivered. Mira, for her part, changed her route home twice that week to avoid passing his restaurant. It didn't stop her from noticing the black car parked at the corner some nights, engine idling, never approaching. Two people, both certain that walking away was the safer, smarter choice. Both wrong. The rival family struck on a Thursday. Word reached Kong Su before Mira even knew she'd become a target. The Choi family, hungry for his territory, had learned about the woman he'd stepped in for. Leverage, they called her. A weakness with a name and an address. He was at her shop within the hour, two men flanking the door before she'd even locked up for the night. "Get your coat," Kong Su said. "Excuse me? You're in danger because of me. You're coming with me until it's resolved. That's not a request." Mira's fear turned fast to fury. "You don't get to just, they will hurt you to hurt me," he cut in, voice low and urgent, in a way she hadn't heard from him before. "I won't let that happen. Please, please." The word landed strange in his mouth, like he wasn't used to it. She went, not because she trusted him, because the alternative terrified her more. The safe house was quiet, spare, nothing like she expected from a man in his world. 3 days folded into each other. Clipped conversations over coffee, neither of them finished. Mira watching him from across rooms, hating that she was starting to see the man underneath the reputation. Someone careful, someone tired, someone lonely, in a way she recognized because she wore it too. On the third night, unable to sleep, she found him standing at the window, watching the street like he expected it to catch fire. "What are you so afraid of?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. Not yet. "I was 7, Kong Su said finally, still facing the window. "My mother ran a small restaurant. Men came for money my father owed. When we couldn't pay, they burned it down with her still inside." Mira's breath caught. "I watched from across the street. A neighbor held me back. I heard her scream my name once. Just once." His voice was flat, controlled. The way people speak when the alternative is falling apart entirely. "That's why I built all this. Power so nobody could ever do that to what's mine again. And it's also why I don't let myself have anything worth burning down for." The room went very still. "My sister," Mira whispered, "was shot outside a corner store 3 years ago. Wrong place, wrong time. Some robbery that had nothing to do with her. I held her hand until the ambulance came. She died looking at me like I was supposed to fix it." If you've ever carried a loss you still blame yourself for, even years later, you already understand exactly what these two are carrying into this room. Kong Su turned to face her fully for the first time. "I'm sorry. Me too." Something passed between them then. Not romance. Not yet. Recognition. Two people who'd built entirely different fortresses out of the exact same grief. "I don't know how to be soft," Kong Su admitted. "I never learned." "Neither do I," Mira said. "But maybe that's not something you're supposed to already know." Neither of them moved closer, but neither of them looked away either. And that, for both of them, was its own kind of terrifying first step. Months passed like a held breath finally released. The threat from the Choi family quieted. A fragile peace bought through channels Mira didn't ask about. She stayed anyway. Told herself it was practical at first. Then stopped pretending. Kong Su learned her coffee order. Mira learned he hummed old trot songs under his breath when he thought no one was listening, off-key and unashamed. She teased him about it once, and he laughed. Actually laughed. A low, startled sound, like his body had forgotten the shape of it. "You should do that more," she told him. "Nobody's ever asked me to." Small things built between them. A shared umbrella. His hand at the small of her back that stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like something else entirely. The night he told her, quiet and terrified, that he loved her, and she said it back before he'd even finished the sentence, like she'd been waiting to say it for weeks. They married in a small ceremony 6 months later. Tae-jin stood at Kong Su's side, smiling in every photograph, congratulating them both with a warmth that never once reached his eyes. Nobody noticed. Why would they? A year after that, Mira gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, Eli and Suji, and Kong Su held them both like something that might shatter, weeping openly for the first time since he was 7 years old. I got you, he whispered to them, to her, to the life he never thought he was allowed to have. All of you, always. It was the happiest any of them would ever be. None of them knew how little time was left. The fire started in the kitchen at 2 a.m. Mira woke to smoke, not sound. Thick, black, already curling under the nursery door before the alarm even registered in her half-asleep brain. She screamed Kong Su's name and he was already moving, already awake, some old animal instinct from a burning restaurant 28 years ago snapping fully alive. Twins, go now, he choked out, shoving her toward the nursery. Downstairs, through the smoke, a figure stood in the doorway, watching the flames climb the walls he'd built. Tae-jin didn't run. He'd set the accelerant himself hours earlier, patient as a man finally collecting on a decade-old debt. He'd never forgiven Kong Su for choosing softness, for choosing her. A boss in love was a boss with a throat exposed, and Tae-jin had been waiting years for the right moment to slit it. Quietly, completely, with nothing left standing to inherit but the empire itself. You should have stayed hard, Tae-jin murmured to the burning house, before disappearing into the dark. Upstairs, Kong Su kicked the nursery door open. Smoke swallowed the hallway whole. Mira had both twins clutched against her chest, coughing, eyes streaming, the window their only way out and 2 stories too high to jump. I can't get them both down alone, she screamed over the roar of the flames. Kong Su's eyes met hers through the smoke, and in that single terrible second, they both understood exactly what this was going to cost. There was no time to think, only to act. And somehow that made it worse. Kong Su tore the curtain rod free, smashed the window, and lowered Mira onto the fire escape ladder, with Suji screaming against her shoulder. Flames licked up the far wall, hungry, closing the room in inches. Eli, Mira begged, reaching back through the smoke. Kong Su, Eli. He was already there, wrapping their son tight against his chest, coughing blood-dark smoke, the ceiling groaning above them like it knew what was coming. He handed the boy down through the window into Mira's shaking arms. Now you, she screamed. Kong Su, now. He looked at her one final second. Not fear in his eyes, something steadier, something that had been building in him since the night he handed her his hand on a counter and said, Don't thank me. I got you, he said. The same 3 words, full circle. Then the beam above the doorway cracked, and he turned back into the burning room instead of following her out. Not because he had to, but because in that half-second, he saw the fire reaching the wall socket wired to the whole east side, and he threw himself against it, buying seconds. Seconds she and the twins needed to get clear before the second explosion. No, Mira's scream tore through the night air as neighbors finally spilled onto the street. The choice had never really been a choice at all, not for him. The fire took 40 minutes to fully die. It took Kong Su 3. Mira sat on the curb wrapped in a stranger's coat, a twin in each arm, watching the house that had held the only real happiness of her life collapse into embers. She didn't cry yet. The shock hadn't cracked open into grief. Not yet. It was Suji, 3 years old and too young to understand any of it, who whispered against her mother's shoulder the words that broke her completely. Daddy said he got us. Mira held her children tighter and finally wept. For Kong Su, for the boy who watched his mother burn and grew into a man who chose, at the very end, to burn instead of run. The investigation took weeks. Accelerant traces. A security camera Tae-jin forgot existed. His own men, once loyal, turned on him fast once Mira handed detectives the recordings Kong Su had quietly kept for years. Insurance, he'd once called it, against exactly this kind of betrayal. Tae-jin was arrested at the airport, a stack of cash and a fake passport in his bag. The empire he'd killed for already dissolving in his hands. Mira never returned to the flower shop. She opened a new one instead, 6 months later, 2 streets from where she'd first met him. Eucalyptus in every corner, the doorbell that made her flinch a little less each year. Above the register, she keeps one photo. Kong Su, laughing, off-key, humming a song nobody asked him to sing. Some nights, tucking Eli and Suji into bed, she still hears his voice in the doorway, steady and certain, echoing across every year that follows. I got you, always. If a love like this, the kind someone would walk back into fire for, has ever touched your life, tell us in the comments. We read every single one.